So, what I wanted to do today, Lindsay, was take a deeper look at what I call assessing anxious or fearful patterns. And I thought, just based on how well you've been doing on your homework assignments with the panic attack record that I see you have there,
I do.
Good, and it's great. How did it go completing that one?
Well, completing it went well, but I had a panic attack yesterday. So
Okay, so you just can tell by your reaction it was probably a pretty intense panic attack, but you
yeah,
understand the form, you completed it well.
I did complete it.
That's great. So what I'm going to have you do is, while you keep it on your lap just like that, is I'm going to ask you some questions to kind of follow through some of that stuff.
Okay.
And I may ask you a few additional questions beyond what you wrote, but that just helps me to gain a more in-depth picture as we start developing some of these skills. For example, one of the things I want to do later on today is work on some relaxation techniques, right?
Okay.
And one of the things that we talked about was some deep breathing techniques. So, and some of the information that you provide me here today, initially with this panic attack record, will help me out, kind of figure out what's the best approach for you. That sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So we already know when it happened. It happened yesterday, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you kind of set it up a little bit for me and where it happened and what happened?
Well, in hindsight, I kind of felt like I was being overly ambitious since our last session.
Okay.
Um, my husband drove me to the grocery store, and that was a really big step for me.
Big step because you typically, for a while, haven't been going to the grocery store?
Well, he usually does all the shopping in general just to, make sure I don't have a panic attack.
Okay. And just for curiosity, Sid's a little ambitious. What do you mean by that? What were you thinking when you were going, all right, let's drive me to the grocery store?
Well, we just wanted to see if I could go into the grocery store by myself.
Oh, okay. So by yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he drove me there, and, the drive was better than I expected. And then this was around 10 o'clock yesterday morning, and there was a lot of people there. And whenever I was walking down one of the aisles, I could kind of feel like my body getting warm.
Okay. Were there a lot of people in the aisles, or?
Well, at first there was just one person, and then a few other people came in, and it just got really crowded.
Okay.
And so things kind of got worse.
Okay. And so, would you describe this? I'm just going to try to follow the flow of the homework assignment as well. Was this panic attack expected or unexpected?
It was unexpected. I mean, I really thought I was doing a good job.
So when you went in, you really thought,
I got this.
I got this.
Yeah.
I understand that.
I mean, whenever you explained everything and showed me kind of like the way things work in terms of your thoughts and behaviors, I thought I had a better grip of it.
And to be honest with you, I think you do have a good understanding of what's going on, but like you said, maybe a little bit ambitious in a sense of, I'm going to go out and give it a shot. And I actually appreciate and respect that. I think that's a good strength of yours. What we may have to do is kind of slightly, you probably would agree with this at this point, pause that a little bit and kind of wait before till we get a few more skills to give it a shot.
Yeah.
But I appreciate your ambition. You could have just said, forget this, I'm not going to go out and do anything. So here we are. You're in the grocery store. You thought it was going to be great. Not going so great. So understandably, it's unexpected.
Right.
And before we get into symptoms, again, just following the panic attack record, okay, I'm seeing a 9 there. That's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So that's one of the higher ones you've been given in a while.
Yeah.
So why don't you kind of tell me some of the symptoms that you experienced there? And if you can, I know it's hard, maybe kind of the order you started to feel them a little bit.
Okay. Well, I got really, really hot, and my palms were getting sweaty.
Okay.
And I kind of feel like my chest getting tight,
Uh-huh.
and And the more I started to notice that, my heart just started just completely racing. It was just like pounding out of my chest.
So chest tight, then racing.
Yep. And then I started to notice like other people could see that I was struggling, and I think it just made it worse. And I started to feel like nauseous in the pit of my stomach.
Okay. I haven't heard that one in a while, but I think it's because you're maybe self-aware of or perceiving that others were noticing how you were feeling.
I mean, it might have been. I just knew I needed to get out of there.
Okay.
I kind of was like having that feelings of choking,
Okay.
and then I just felt like I was losing control.
And losing control.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. You're doing a good job of explaining the symptoms. Let's just keep going then.
Okay.
The next part is help me out a little bit, flush out some of these thoughts. We touched upon them, but I want to get into a little bit more detail of what you were thinking both in the moment and then kind of afterwards as well.
Okay. Well, with the aisle being so crowded, and starting to feel those symptoms, I just felt like I couldn't escape, and like knowing that my symptoms were getting worse, I just knew I couldn't, like, what happens if I just fall out and have a heart attack right there in the middle of the aisle? Like, how am I
Right.
going to get help? And
Okay.
all those people were there. It just
Okay. And so then, what did you do afterwards?
Well, I tried to remember what you said, what happened, what you described in our last session. But I just had to get out. I felt like I was losing complete control and I
Okay.
needed to get out. So I just ran to the parking lot,
Okay.
and as soon as I saw my husband sitting in the car, I started to feel way more relieved and just like ready to go home. I just needed to get away from there and back to our home.
So just to summarize, you're in the aisle, having the symptoms. We don't have to rehash those, but pretty clear. I got that form to look at. Feel like you can't escape, need some help. The heart attack maybe wasn't as tense before, but that thought
Yeah.
popped up again, and eventually you just flee right out of it. You just left your carriage, was it? Just kind of,
I
just left the carriage. And
I kept telling myself, like, I know I'm not having a heart attack. I know,
so
Adam
you were
told me
trying to
I'm not-
remember, yeah.
Yeah. And I tried, but it's just my body let me know I needed to get out.
Right. And that's good that you're remembering some of the stuff with it. And what we'll find over therapy is a sense that it's one thing cognitively to know it, it's another thing to kind of feel it and be rest assured. So even though intellectually you're saying, I'm not going to have a heart attack and die, at that point in the moment, the emotions were so intense that just was not seeming rational at all.
Right.
That's there.
Yeah.
And so one of the it's great that you are ambitious to test it out, but because, like you said, a little bit too soon, what we'll find as we do some of these techniques, instead of just intellectualizing it, hopefully you'll start to feel it as well. So what I'm getting at here is, I know you seems like you're kind of let down, a little disappointed in yourself, and that's okay. But kind of give it some time, as over time you'll notice that that intellectual thoughts actually you'll start to feel them as well. They'll feel real. So, like, we don't need to quit just yet. You know what I mean? One thing I noticed is that you said you left, went to the parking lot, and even as you were saying it, I kind of noticed a sense of relief. Was it when you saw your husband there sitting in the car?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you notice that all that sympathetic system, fight or flight, did it start to? I know the adrenaline's still there, but you notice the symptoms start to decrease a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My chest didn't feel so tight.
Yeah.
Whenever
That's kind of.
I know he's there for me, and he knows how to respond whenever I get like that.
Yeah. And so you get in the car, you feel relief. Did you guys go home or somewhere else?
Well, we decided not to go to the hospital,
Okay.
and we went straight home. And by the time we got home, I think I was just kind of recovering from the panic attack, but the symptoms were gone.
The symptoms were gone. Okay. And I want to ask a couple questions about your husband in a second, but after you're at home, because now I like to think about thoughts after the event as well. Maybe, since you said this happened yesterday, now you're home, you're relaxed and calm. You obviously filled that out afterwards, right? What were your kind of thoughts about, as even if you haven't thought about it yet, just kind of replaying the event in your mind now as you're sitting there, kind of, okay, I give this a shot. I tried it, didn't go so well.
Just I just kind of feel like I failed. I mean, I feel kind of silly because it's really so, like, it's should be so easy to just go into a grocery store.
Right, right. But it wasn't for you.
Right.
Right. And so what I'll say, and I've noticed sometimes you've used this language a little bit as well, like the failed, right? It sounds like splitting hairs, but it kind of depends on how you look at it, right? So understandably, and it makes sense, I would do the same thing too. You're looking at the final outcome. I went to go to the grocery store to go shopping, and I did not exit with my food purchase, right? You left the cart there and came home.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, maybe it was a bit ambitious, probably a little bit too soon. On the other hand, one way I like to look at it is the fact that you got the hope and motivation to go there, right? Said to me, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a few months at least since you've even been to a grocery store,
Yeah.
right? So
That's true.
give yourself some credit. You at least gave a shot. You got the cart, you pushed it around, you got a few items in there, but didn't make it all the way.
Yeah.
Okay? And so the way I look at it is, yeah, maybe it would have been best if she wasn't too ambitious to try it, but working with what we have, I also give her credit for that's actually much further than she's ever gone doing this particular activity than she's done in a long time. Okay? And I think that's something I'll keep in my mind as well as your therapist of how we categorize these events as success or failures. Instead of me looking at success or failure,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to, especially for you, I think it's going to be helpful to kind of look at it somewhere in the middle. You know,
Okay.
instead of all or nothing, it's at least partial. And so what I look at is what you've already been able to do on your own, as you kind of put it, right? And so the way I look at it is just imagine what Lindsay can do when we actually finally get to these coping skills that you jumped ahead with a little bit, right? The relaxation skills and the thinking skills and what you've already done before going there.
Yeah.
You kind of see where I'm coming from on there?
Yeah.
I understand emotionally if it doesn't feel like a success, but I look at it as that's a lot of progress that she's made compared to before. Okay?
That actually feels really good.
Yeah. So it's not all for naught. And hey, it gave you something to write about too, to come in and give
I
you.
did get my homework
Yeah,
assignment
you did get
done.
your homework done, right? And this will be very helpful too. It kind of gives me more insight of what direction to take this. And one area of insight that I think is going to be really helpful for me, we talked a little bit about before about safety behaviors, right? Things that we do either for ourselves or something that we kind of bring along with us to help us cope with the situation. And I don't blame you for trying it the first time, for bringing your husband there, but I noticed that a lot of times you mention your husband, you're like, and a smile and relaxation comes across your face, and that's good that you have a very supportive husband for you. On the other hand, something I think we're going to have to kind of integrate a little bit more into your treatment plan is specifically targeting your husband, not him personally, but using him as a safety behavior. So eventually we want to get to the point where you can do some of these tasks, right? But maybe not always have your husband around. You see what I'm getting at there?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you seem a little anxious about that.
I don't like that. I don't like the idea of that at all.
Right.
Yeah.
What we'll probably end up doing is eventually having your husband come in for a session. We kind of, I know you've already told me you've been talking to him about what you're doing, which is great. That's why he came with you to the grocery store. Is talk a little bit more later on when we start doing what we call in vivo exposure, where we'll have to eventually kind of fade him out. So if we look at like Lindsay and husband going along into the grocery store, eventually a little less him and a little more you, right? Remember we talked a little bit too about in vivo exposures where I'm going to help you out initially. So as your therapist, I'm going to be there to help you out initially, but eventually I want you to try doing some of these things on your own. Not right away, not now, we're not there yet. So it's just something to think about eventually, because part of the fact that why he reduces all that anxiety is kind of good in terms of your relationship, but in terms of eventually exposing yourself to experiencing these symptoms and being able to cope through them, eventually you're going to want himself and myself out of the picture, eventually. Okay? So how does that kind of make sense there, what I'm saying there?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's going to be hard.
It is. It's going to be hard. But that's okay. in some ways, when we know it's going to be hard and it gets a little stressful, that also knows we're putting a lot of work into it. One thing I've noticed though is that just right now, as you're sitting here, you seem a little bit more relaxed and maybe a little less pessimistic than where when you came in earlier today. Because when you came in, even during our check-in, you looked a little glum, and I think it was because of what happened yesterday. But do you understand the part too? Just to summarize,
Yeah.
not a failure. The outcome wasn't what you wanted, but maybe a little bit of progress was made.
Yeah, I think whenever I look at it through your lens, it makes a bit more sense, and I don't feel so bad.
Right, and you said my lens, which is true. Eventually, over time, hopefully, at least your own version of it will become your own lens as well. Okay, and I think two of the techniques that are going to really help you out with that is going to be some working on some breathing techniques, and also some ways of working on some of those thoughts. Okay, and I think what we're going to do before we leave today is start working on some of those breathing techniques. Does that sound good?
It does.
All right, give it a shot.